My name's Erol Alkan. You're here in my studio here, which is called, it keeps changing, the name keeps changing. It was called Fantasy Sound at one point, it might have changed since then, but everything that I do is done here, unless I'm working with a band, but everything other than that is custom built to do whatever I need to do. Okay, this is a synthesizer that doesn't work, which has been, it's currently something that's propping up other synthesizers at the moment, but it is actually a Prophet 8 and they're really rare, very expensive, but when it don't work, not much use to anybody. But I can show you some stuff that does work, which I do use. The Juno 6 does something that other synths don't or can't do. I've had it midied up so I can trigger it whatever I play on it on a computer, or clock the arpeggiator. One of the things that I use a lot of are over here, the Cat Octave, which is kind of quite a wild synthesizer. That just makes some amazing spacey sounds, and I used it as the bass line for the remix I just did for Tough City Kids. I would show you the Monopoly, which I used on both Spectrum and Silver Echoes, but a friend of mine plugged it in at the wrong voltage and it blew up and killed all the chips, so that's no longer here. It's at a repair place. I don't think it's going to get repaired, so I'm going to have to find the new one, I think. This is quite an interesting synth actually. This is a Transcendent polysynth by Powertran, which is an old company that made kit synthesizers back in the 80s, or I suppose late 70s. There's a magazine called ETI which details how to build synthesizers, and the Transcendent 2000 was a monosynth which a lot of people made, but apparently the polysynth version, which is this one here, was so tricky to build that only a few of them were ever made in its entirety, and I had two of them. I gave one to Soulwax actually, so I think they've got one in their studio. See what I also quite like? Roland have reissued these drum machines, and I hope this doesn't look like an advert for them, but I have to say I really like them. So obviously the 808 and 909. I kind of have various conversations with people who tell me they don't sound like the old machines, or you know, that they're lesser and stuff, but I tend to find that it's as much to do with what you run them through, and you know, your patterns and how you approach it, as much as whether or not you've actually got a piece of gear from 40 years ago. A lot of great records that we've heard in the past, you know, with like real 303s on, more 303 sound usually have been made with some kind of copy, but they've been made in an inventive way that, you know, makes us want to make records of a similar kind of style. So I've got a real 303 here. This is interesting as well, a Vermona. This is actually used on Spectrum. There's a really kind of light tom drum pattern that comes in at the beginning underneath the live drums. But this is, I believe this is a Russian 808 copy, or that's what they were trying to do. It kind of came out quite different, but because of that, it's interesting. I had this problem with it where I couldn't clock it properly from my computer, so I spent 6 months trying to find somebody who could send me the chip with the updated firmware on it so I could do that, and eventually found someone in Germany who could do it. So that works now, and it was used on that track. I mean, everything that I mix goes through this Chandler, which is basically an old EMI desk in a box, and it sounds incredible. That's amazing. That was 50 quid, that desk up there, 50 quid from a junk shop. It's hand built for a theatre, but every single one of those channels sounds completely different, and you get, when you overdrive it, you get almost like a distinctly different overdrive in each one, just purely because the circuitry is failed in each line in a different way. So you get something distinctly interesting from it all. I'm a great believer in having things that are, you know, having super brilliant, well-maintained, expensive things in a studio, and having things that are just bought from, you know, junk shops or whatever, because there's a use for everything. Yeah, it's probably about between 50 and 60 years old, you know, So it's just, you know, there's no way of repairing it. I've tried. The Effectron 2 is one of those delays or things that whenever someone hears it, another musician hears it, they just want one as well, which meant that you used to be able to pick them up for about 50 quid on eBay, but they're about 300 quid now. I've got to that point where I just don't want to keep buying more and more things, just because I just want to really be able to use and get the most out of what I got already. But I tell you something I've got a lot out of is this AKAI S612 sampler, which was being used as a doorstop by a bloke called Will, who I met at a party about 5 or 6 years ago, and we were talking about stuff, and he said, oh, I've got a sampler that I don't want, it's being used as a doorstop, would you like it? So I said yes, and he came and brought it over, and within a few days I'd kind of made a bulk of my first EP on it from using it, because I found that approach of not having, you know, so many choices and having limitations was really liberating. So as soon as you kind of had a sound that you liked, you stuck with it. I think I heard Armin van Helden saying something similar a long time ago, where, you know, he'd never saves his sounds on his sampler. I think once a track is made and it's done, that's it, it's gone. Which I really like that. I like the idea of, you know, once you've kind of committed to something and you've made it, it's, you know, you can't go back and change it. I think that's a really, really liberating thing.